technical difficulties, again, please contact me via the Zoom chat box, via email at sjordan@ctps.org, or by phone at 857-702-3675. And I'll turn it back over to Len for introductions.
Thank you, Stella. And I would go around and do introductions, but the background here is a little loud, and normally I call out people, and so I think it'd just be a little difficult with all the background sound here as people would introduce themselves. So maybe we'll do it at the end, but probably not me. So at this point, let's go to public comment. If you want to make a public comment, just raise your hand electronically. I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. Actually, Joe McQueen.
I had a question that I put in the chat box. What would we need in terms of the number of members for a quorum today? We were taking any votes.
Stella?
Yep, let me go through the attendance list real quick, John.
We seem a little thin today. Attendance-wise, not weight-wise.
Yeah, it looks like we're one short. So possibly, hopefully someone else joins to pass any motions, but I mean, we can still go ahead with the other content, right, Len?
Oh yeah, we can. I mean, it's just now we just can't take any votes, so that's fine. And it's early on, so plenty of time.
Actually, I'm not sure it's a legal meeting if there's not a quorum, so you might not even have to take notes. It might just be a gathering of people.
Well, yeah, we may not have to, but we'll go ahead and take notes, so that people know what happened. It'll be recorded, so we just won't take any votes, so yeah. All right. And there's still plenty of time for people to show up. So I guess at whatever point we cross the threshold, you can just let us know, at an appropriate time, and then we'll know. So okay, so then I guess we're not. I guess when it comes to nominations, then are we voting on the nominations? Or the nominating committee just announcing what the nominations are?
I believe the election committee is just announcing the nominations, and we can accept any additional nominations from the floor during the meeting as well, but nominations will close at the end of the meeting.
Right. And we don't have to vote on that. That's just procedural, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So all right. So then at this point, we will toss it over to the nominating committee. Who's in charge of that?
Anna Christina isn't she?
That was my thinking, but since I wasn't involved in any of the deliberations of the nominating committee, I was just waiting for someone from that committee to say. So it seems like that's what you're saying, and I'm still not seeing Anna Christina, so we will postpone that part of the agenda until she arrives, unless someone else in the committee wants to speak.
I haven't received any notifications of any names of anything since the earlier memo came out, I think before last week.
All right, and then we'll wait, so okay, so I would say let's go to the workshop. Part of me is like, let's do the minutes, but let's do the workshop. Well, we can't do the minutes because we don't have a quorum, so that takes care of that. So let's go to the workshop part of the agenda. So that will feature Ethan LaCointe, and Louis Casey. And if you all want to introduce yourselves, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Len. Sorry about that. I had to unmute myself. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. I'll be running through this presentation today, but my colleague Logan Casey, who will introduce himself after me, will also be assisting on this.
Yeah, great. And thank you, Ethan. And hi, everyone. My name's Logan. I'm the Capital Programming Planner for the Boston Region MPO. And Ethan will be kind of running through the presentation today, and I'll join back in for the Menti as well. But if you don't mind, Stella, could we actually take control of the screen? Because I did update the slides just to put in a bit more of information before this meeting.
You should have slide control now, Logan.
Awesome. I think you just need to stop screen sharing.
Okay.
Thank you. Alrighty. And you can take it away, Ethan.
Yep, I can see that just fine. Thank you, Logan. So to start off at the top of the agenda for this presentation, I'd like to start off kind of with an introduction to what the Transit Transformation Program is, starting with a description of the program, how funding is being allocated as part of the long-range plan's investment allocation goals, and the types of eligible projects that the MPO is looking to fund under the program. As Logan mentioned earlier, we will have a public engagement activity through a piece of software called Mentimeter, just to kind of solicit ideas around what the program should do and what kinds of objectives and regional needs it should further, along with some upcoming dates around deadlines and deliverables for the program, including when more information will be coming available, and some updates on the scoring criteria, such that when the program launches this fall, applicants that are seeking funding through the program, what they'll be evaluated against come spring. If we can head on to the next slide real quick. As far as materials for today's workshop, the Transit Transformation Program has been subject to a work scope development, and the first deliverable for this work scope was the Transit Transformation Literature Review. This is a review of, I believe, 8 scholarly sources dating from around 2015 up until 2022 regarding kind of the viability on best practices of transit investment programs, specifically looking at regional bus transit and also some rail transit, not only in a broader national context, but several pieces on local New England and Boston-based transit programs. This has been made available on the MPO calendar, and the invitation for this meeting on that calendar, I should mention, just for your reference later after this meeting. Happy to answer any questions there in the question and answer period or after this call. If we go on to the next slide, please. Just to kind of start on the definition of this program and how it emerged. This is being driven heavily through the adoption of the MPO's new long-range transportation plan, Destination 2050. Transit transformation is a modification of the existing transit modernization program, which was established under the previous LRTP, Destination 2040. This program takes that original definition of transit modernization, which largely sought to make upgrades to existing transit infrastructure with a focus on future-proofing it in state of good repair and incorporating more transformative investments into that framework, combining the sort of window of opportunity generated by making a state of good repair improvement to an asset to incorporate upgrades to things like multimodal access and other goals, including potentially electrification. If we can go on to the next slide to discuss kind of in more detail what this program is. The LRTP sets aside the funding allocation targets for each major MPO investment program, and the Transit Transformation Program is subject to the same. This graphic on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen shows the funding allocated to MPO investment programs in Destination 2050. 5% of MPO overall funding is allocated for the Transit Transformation Program. That said, this amounts to approximately $6.5 million available between federal fiscal years 2026 and 28 in the current federal fiscal year 24 to 28 Transportation Improvement Program. The first year of funding for this program in federal fiscal year 25 only has $2.5 million available in it. This is because funding for the Transit Transformation Program was preemptively programmed into MBTA investments in commuter rail that were initially funded across federal fiscal years 24 and 5. In order to fund those investments, some money was drawn down from that set aside. This remaining $2.5 million in the program will be used to prioritize for this first year of the program projects that are seeking funding from RTAs, specifically the Metro West Regional Transit Authority and the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. And again, the Transit Transformation Program is somewhat unique, like the Community Connections Program, in that funding is generally assigned in earlier years of the TIP versus later, thanks to the set-aside process that MPO staff conduct. If we can go on to the next slide real quick, to talk about kind of scoping out what project sizing is for eligibility, given that $6.5 million target set aside, project funding sizes that we're looking at are around $250,000 to $4 million. Now, this isn't a hard concrete framework or kind of benchmark for RTAs and the MBTA target, but it is generally what fits with that $6.5 million set aside. The set aside could fund surpluses for projects that do cost more than $6.5 million. And one unique element of the funding type that we are using here, given we are doing what's called a flex of federal highway dollars to the Federal Transit Administration to use their funding, is we have more flexibility for carryover in multi-year investments. For example, in the current federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP, the MPO has around $12 million for Jackson Square Phase 2 and fiscal 2024. If we did obey that $6.5 million kind of cap as far as what is available through set-asides, we would have to program the project split across those 2 years. There are some exceptions to this, though. If we can go on to the next slide, namely kind of what we're looking at in terms of our priorities to the program. We're looking for projects that enhance amenities for transit customers, improve overall station accessibility, as evidenced, as we'll get to later, in some of the investments we've already made in larger scale MBTA stations, expanding station capacity and accessibility in addition to that, through the creation of multimodal connections, namely taking the existing capacity of a station and making it so that more people can access that service with safer pedestrian or bicycle connections to and from that location, and generally improving the state of good repair of a facility, including things like tracks, signals, and power systems, kind of the unseen supporters of transit operations, and to some extent, supporting limited fleet modernization and possibly conversion in order to assist in not only overall climate resiliency, but also to foment future electrification efforts. Now, the reason why I mentioned earlier that there may be some exceptions to kind of project sizing comes on these next couple of slides. And this is kind of the context of what the MPO has funded under the Transit Modernization Program to date. Starting off with the Columbus Avenue Phase 2 project, this has actually been subject to 2 different rounds of funding by the MPO for its Phase 2. The first starting in federal fiscal year 2022, the second being federal fiscal year 2024, amounting to around $26 million of total contributions. This is a bus lane, shelter, and TSP project for the Columbus Avenue corridor, ranging from the current terminus of rapid bus lines at Jackson Square northward, mirroring kind of the Orange Line, to conclude at Ruggles Station, all on the Orange Line there. It also incorporates enhanced pedestrian and bicycle connections into and out of those MBTA stations, basically taking the very popular sort of bike highway that is the Southwest Corridor Trail and tying them better into those MBTA stations to improve multimodal accessibility. There are also additions to green infrastructure, nature-based solutions there, and an overall reduction in impervious surface along the roadway, in addition to stormwater upgrades. On the subject of accessibility improvements and also near to Columbus Ave is the Jackson Square Accessibility Improvements Project. This project includes the construction of a new elevator at Jackson Square, modernization of that existing elevator, and upgrades to lighting and overall state of good repair work. If we go on to the next slide, we also have kind of some of our largest stations that provide more broad outside of Boston regional network improvements. This is the Lynn Station Improvements Phase 2 project. This is a $48.1 million transit project, which was effectively a total overhaul of Lynn's commuter rail station. There is also the Reading Station Wilbur Interlocking project, which is a more commuter rail operations focused project that looked more at increasing the possibility of improving headways on the Haverhill line down to 40 minutes from an hour of what they're, or I'm sorry, 30 minutes from 40 minutes at peak headway frequencies for an overall investment of around $12 million. It's generally considered a no-nonsense, rapid-to-build program or rather a no regrets investment. There's many of these kind of available through the MBTA's capital improvement plan. And of course, also eligible under the not the Community Connections, the Transit Transformation Program, and formerly under Community Connections, will be transit signal priority projects that generally range in cost anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 based on the corridor. One example being Broad Street in Lynn. Now, if we go on to the next slide and talk about kind of future projects, the reason I alluded to that $6.5 million cap earlier is that, as many members of RTAC may be aware, there is frequently funding availability due to project delays in the first 2 years of a new TIP. If projects are delayed out of, let's say hypothetically, federal fiscal year 25 to 26, there may be funding availability to fund projects that are greater than the set-aside amount of $6.5 million. This is by no means a guarantee and is honestly symptomatic of an issue when it comes to project readiness, therefore isn't ideal, but the $6.5 million is not a hard cap and is rather more of an accommodation that is being made to fund certain projects. Just as with Lynn Commuter Rail Station at $48.1 million, Jackson Square at $26 million, there's still the potential for larger scale projects through this program. Those kinds of projects, from what we have already heard from our workshops with RTAs and the MBTA and other even local stakeholders, have been improvements to things like bus transit hubs, operations and maintenance facilities, expansions and repair, intelligent transportation systems, which can be things like sensors and anything that helps to aggregate data around how the transit system is operating, and supporting a transition to either low emission or no emission vehicles for RTA fleets, not only for the vehicles themselves, but potentially also investing in supportive infrastructure to establish and maintain that fleet, in addition to small scale fleet procurement, likely only for the RTAs for a time, just to given the total fleet scale that the MBTA operates with relative to an RTA and the costs associated there. If we can move on to the next slide, just to kind of talk more broadly around objectives and off the content before we go into discussion. Right now, staff have completed task 1, which is the literature review and stakeholder feedback, and are working on the total development of the transit transformation program. This includes a universe of projects, which is consistent with other investment programs in the TIP, that we are soliciting project ideas for from not only RTAs and the MBTA, but also municipalities, to try to find a way to bridge a dialogue between municipal priorities and regional transit priorities and try to figure out where intersections between the two happen. Moreover, the most work is currently happening on the definition on what kinds of projects are eligible and the scoring criteria around how those projects are evaluated. We are working on writing up some draft criteria for some upcoming RTAC and MPO board meetings, and we're going to be looking forward to sharing with you at a future date. And of course, we will also have presentations to the MPO board, not only to kind of review that criteria and additional information, but to formally kick off the program once it's time to start work on the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP. On the subject of that criteria, if we can go on to the next slide. The criteria for this program will largely define, or rather, I would like to kind of cover what this criteria is, as it is the first time I believe RTAC will be seeing what the impact of the new LRTP will be on all TIP investment program criteria. The criteria rewrite being done for the Transit Transformation Program is also being performed for all other investment programs, including things like community connections, complete streets, and intersection improvements. The goals set by the long-range plan define the criteria that projects are weighed against. These goals inform category areas of equity with the objective for an inclusive and transportation planning process that not only provides equal benefits, but also makes sure that no population bears a sort of disproportionate burden or cost from a project. There's also the safety prioritization category and goal, namely moving towards a net zero situation in the transportation network where there are no fatalities, and that we move towards zero fatalities in the long run with our investments. Mobility and reliability supports the easy and reliable movement of people and goods throughout the region. And on the next slide, we have our last 3, one of them being new: access and connectivity, providing transportation options and improving access. I'll skip to the last one, which is clean air and healthy communities, which is the provision of a transportation system free of greenhouse gas emissions and any pollutants. And the 5th and new goal area being resiliency. The resiliency criteria category is kind of a sibling to the clean air and healthy communities category, in that both support the expansion of a transportation system that can not only reduce carbon emissions, but is prepared to deal with the consequences of climate change and resist disruptions resulting from a variety of hazards. This is transportation that supports a sustainable environment, utilizes things like nature-based solutions, and makes sure that people can go about their daily lives while responding to and adapting to any kinds of hazards coming from the system. Now, with that in mind, that was a lot of information given by me, but if we move on to the next slide, Logan can kind of start walking us through our Mentimeter activity, where we'll be soliciting feedback from you guys as far as what you want to see from this program. So I'll pass it off to Logan.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ethan. And while I'm getting the Mentimeter, I think it'd be a good time to pause and see if anybody had questions about the presentation. We can go back to the slides and have Ethan answer. But I can also put the Menti up so we can start logging into that.
All right, so let me pull up the participants, and so that I can see if people raising their hands. Oh, there's AC. So I think we're at a quorum, So AC, for those, what's your question, comment?
No, I just had a quick question as far as you mentioned increasing capacity at certain, points. And I'm wondering, I mean, like the envelope is the envelope for, say, a tunnel subway station. I'm assuming you mean outdoor stations, but I don't know what the traffic is like since the pandemic, but there had been times where I was on the red line where it was dangerous. I mean, the capacity was, it was overcrowded and dangerous. So I don't know, when you mention that, what exactly do you mean? Or is that too technical right now? It depends on per project, or?
Great question. It is actually the same question we received at our MPO board members presentation. And it is a context sensitive kind of answer there. The way that we were viewing capacity improvements originally was based on multimodal accessibility, creating more connections and ways for more people in kind of the neighboring communities around a transit station to unlock access to a nearby station. One example could be, for example, Sullivan Square Station in sort of the Lost Village area of Somerville, in addition to improving connections so that it's easier to use that station for folks in Charlestown, kind of improving its overall capacity to serve its local neighborhood by making it safer to get there in the first place. But in addition to that, there's also kind of, as you mentioned, regarding the envelope, potential for other improvements to the station that may kind of help move more people through it. These can be things like not only wayfinding improvements, but also for the commuter rail, for example, things like upgrading station platforms for more like level boarding, for example, that improves the ease at which more trains can be put through, reducing things like boarding times, for example. But again, the investments made under this program are kind of being defined by the direction that the RTAs want to go, and the MBTA as well, and what kinds of investments they want to spend MPO dollars on effectively.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Dan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Dan Jaffe. I'm a resident over in Charlestown and advocate for transportation for us as well as the neighboring communities.
Thanks.
The issue that I see is we have, as an example, a community college T station, which actually has two platforms independent of each other. And right now we're only utilizing one for both directions. It'd be nice to be able to re-enable the second platform. Could funds for that be applied here?
If it was a priority for the MBTA and they wanted to seek funding for it, they could apply for it, given how we've set up the program. It's really all up to who applies for the project.
Okay, so then the MBTA would have to do that. So then my next part of this question is the pathways to our T stations is somewhat limited because of the Gilmore Bridge pathway is very narrow. Could this apply to improving the pathway between the stations? Here, I'm talking about Leechmere Station to the Orange Line Station of Community College.
So one of the, that's a very good question because it kind of touches on one of the items we didn't discuss in this presentation. And it's the nature of how we define investment programs at the MPO. While that investment could be defined as a transit transformation investment, it could also fit just as neatly in something like our bicycle and pedestrian network connections investment program, or through our complete streets investment program. One good example being Columbus Ave. The Columbus Ave Phase 2 project could classify itself as either a complete streets project or would be a transit transformation project. The short answer is yes, that definitely could be eligible, but it could also be classified as a variety of different investments in whatever manner gives it the most flexibility to be funded for construction.
Okay, one last question. Because of the limitation of the right of way of Gilmore Bridge, we can't expand it, obviously. It's encapsulated on each side, but there is room beside it on another tangent that gets us across the rails in the Levitt Circle connector for bicyclists, creating a new bridge for them. Is that conceivable in this program?
If it is something that the owner of the assets involved and the owner of all those transit facilities and paths was receptive to and was interested in, we could try to potentially fund such a project. On the subject of individuals who own the asset, I do see that Sandy Johnston has their hand up as well. So
thanks, Ethan. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning has an active study going about the future of the Gilmore Bridge, which Dan, you may be aware of, but I figure everybody should know about. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be looking into, but that would be the place to start thinking about alternatives for the future of the whole area right now.
Oh, great. I'd like to get involved in that if you could get my name in the list somewhere.
So if you want to send me an email, I'll drop my email in the chat, and I don't know who exactly is handling that, but I'll figure it out for you.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm good.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sandy, for that. So just making sure that everybody's gotten to the Menti. If you go to menti.com and you enter this 8-digit code, you should be able to join our meeting. I will move on to the next slide. So just to give you guys an overview, this Menti is an aid to our discussion. So we're going to have a series of questions. There's various ways to interact with these questions. And then we'll kind of, have a discussion based upon these answers, answer kind of questions going from there. We'll have a question at the end asking you guys how you enjoyed Menti as well too, because this is a new engagement tool we're kind of using. But to start with, we do have a question. So what aspects of projects should transit transformation prioritize? So these are some of the feedback that we initially received from MPO board members and in our initial conversations when developing the transit transformation program. This is a question we've asked kind of our different groups that we've interacted with in this engagement. But we'd be interested to see, what this group thinks about prioritization of these various improvements. I want to caveat that we definitely know that these are all important, but we want to see, what you might be most interested, in terms of investments for this program. So,
Logan, would you actually mind going back one slide just real quick so I can drop the code for the Menti in the chat?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's 76925493. And it's also available at the top of the screen if you're having trouble getting in.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great, so we're seeing a bunch of responses flowing in already. I will say the early responses for high prioritization of accessibility improvements is good to see, and it's also something we've seen among other groups that we've kind of engaged with about this topic. So if anybody is very supportive of that and would like to maybe jump off the conversation, feel free to add in, or any other topic as well too. I see Sheila's hand.
Hi, Logan. Thank you. Can you give an example of transit equity improvement, what that might be, or what do we mean by that?
Yeah, can I pass that question to Ethan? I might be more comfortable if you could grab that one.
Sure. So one example of what we may be looking to do, we've actually recently had discussions with some folks from the city of Boston on this. Identifying neighborhoods or areas that may be underserved by transit access, not only meaning low frequency of transit service, but just a transit desert where there is not any station. The Fairmount line was historically a good example of improving transit service in a community that was underserved by the MBTA, and improving accessibility to stations like those on the MBTA's Fairmount line is something we would also kind of like to look for as an example kind of investment we want to see in this program.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I would revote mine a little higher, a 5 on that one, if I could redo it.
I see Andy's hand.
Yeah, one question that I have is, so one thing, I just joined about a couple minutes ago because I had a meeting that ran over late, but apologies for joining a little bit late. I may have missed this in kind of coming in late here. Making some selections here was actually a little bit difficult for me because I think I'm not aware of kind of how the funding programs around transit really all work together or maybe work against each other. And so, right, like I understand, right, like the MBTA may have you know, quite a bit of money right now from like the state for some of the state of good repair improvements, because it's been such a big part of the conversation around the T is like, you know, the lack of a state of good repair. And so therefore a lot of funding has been mobilized for that. And I'm not sure whether the MPO's funds should be dedicated toward that, you know, in the same way, you know, because there are other priorities that might be, you know, not being taken care of because the state's focus has been so much on, you know, the track safety, the state of good repair, those things. So it's a little bit hard for me to pick because even though I'm paying attention, it's been really, you know, hard to pick out like, okay, how does the MPO play a role? And what are the values that maybe the MPO should speak to that maybe aren't being, you know, represented in other ways? But, you know, I think these, so far, it seems like it kind of aligns more or less in the direction that I would go personally. And so, you know, I'm kind of okay with that, but it would be good to have some more of that context too.
I ditto that, because that's what as I was filling it out, I was thinking, well, what's funded in other places and what's, you know, like what, so I had the exact same questions. So you can take my responses with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe Ethan, you'd want to jump in and maybe fill in the background of kind of, you know, our TIP applications and how we've been seeing, you know, a decrease in the amount of TIP applications, and then maybe jump to how, you know, how the MBTA has been kind of backstopping, you know, filling our funding for a while, and how this transit transformation, you know, at least this year we're looking at, you know, more RTAs as well for funding.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So as Logan mentioned, since the 2021 to 25 TIP, we have gone down from seeing, if we exclude the Community Connections program, because that represents 2% of the funding and about half the projects we get. If you exclude the Community Connections program, we have gone from seeing anywhere from around 18 to 20 projects seeking MPO funding in a given year within the application period. And that's important because those are projects the MPO gets to score and weigh in on, down to 8. And what has happened as a result of that is very frequently, not only do we have fewer projects to assign funding to in the new year of a TIP, when we have kind of unfettered access to that money in terms of availability for new projects, but when a project gets delayed, there is nothing on the shelf that can be used to fill it. Traditionally, MassDOT and the MBTA have provided projects that are kind of consistent with the MPO's goals and objectives for those first few years, but those projects are often not scored, or, you know, there's no real opportunity for discussion kind of around those projects earlier in the TIP cycle. They usually come up in late March or mid-April, right around when the TIP is already going out for draft public comment. What the Transit Transformation Program will allow us to do is to take those projects, see them sooner, discuss them sooner, assign a score, and kind of have a back and forth to determine those priorities so that they aren't just filling gaps in the funding, but they are also demonstrably addressing those kinds of goals and criteria areas. Moreover, as well, of course, is it does open up more opportunities for the MPO to not only fund a greater volume of projects, but a more diverse array of projects. Historically, I was actually doing this math recently. The MPO has, I think, since 2016, funded $310 million of direct transit investment. Now, caveat, $190 million of that was the Green Line extension, which I am happy to take credit for funding part of the Green Line extension, while it does predate my tenure at the MPO. But even still, that is around $110 million of MPO investment in transit, which is well above the 5% target that we set. I don't think, this is what I always say, I don't think regionally there's any disagreement with funding projects at a greater level than just 5% of MPO funding if it improves our transit system given its current state. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but Logan knows how to set me off, so.
I saw Len's hand go up, but down again, so I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
I inadvertently knocked my hand back down, so I have a question, so would a car sharing program or a vehicle sharing program, I really want to make it automobile because we have bike sharing already kind of with Blue Bikes. Could that fit into transit equity improvements if the access to the vehicles were kind of priced like transit?
I don't think it would fit in the transit transformation program, but there may be other investment programs it may fit into. The tip is living document, so it's not like, one other important thing to mention is, even though the transit transformation program is launching this autumn, in each subsequent tip cycle, there may be opportunities to incorporate new investments. That's not just for transit transformation, but for every other investment program. Good example, the transit transformation program is actually going to be taking the transit signal priority projects and bus lane projects that are currently in the community connections program, kind of moving the burden of funding those projects into the transit program to open up more space for other projects and community connections.
So I guess now it kind of begs the question, like, what is transit? You know what I mean? So how do we define transit? Which I hadn't really thought about until I kind of asked these questions again. It's like, so where is it? Where is the line between transit and non-transit? Which I'm not going to ask you to answer now. And you can say, Len, go and answer it yourself, and I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I did see that John McQueen mentioned in the chat as well that the community connections program is potentially one example where an investment like that could exist, but it is not something we have yet considered. So we can definitely look into that going forward.
I see Dan's hand raised.
Yeah, I want to expand upon that thought. We now have small people movers that are maybe 10, 15 people in an EV, and eventually they will be autonomous, I'm sure. But would that be a place that we could do something? So it's, for instance, here in Charlestown, we only have one grocery store, and it's very expensive, unfortunately. And the nearby major grocery stores are in other neighborhoods. But it'd be nice to have a transit solution to get people from here to there, obviously on a schedule of some sort. But we don't need huge buses or vans. We just need something that is simple and can move around the community efficiently.
That's a great point, Dan. And it might not be something specifically for the transit transformation program, but I work with Ethan on the community connections program, and it does sound like it could be a fit for funding in the future within something like that. To give you a little background, the community connections program is our first and last mile funding program. We fund a bunch of different projects in it, most notably like bike lanes, bicycle shelters and parking, bike share, so the Blue Bike system we're helping fund, and then of course we do the shuttles program as well too. We have a couple different shuttles we fund on a pilot basis, And while autonomy isn't like a conversation we're necessarily having today, because the technology isn't obviously at that level, as you said, it could definitely be something that we consider in the future, along with car share as well too. Like Ethan has mentioned, we have found with the shuttle program that there are a lot of different aspects to it, and we're trying to find different ways to make it successful. So like new ideas like autonomy is definitely something we'd be open to considering, if it could have a potential benefit. So
yeah, we sort of did a little project here using isolated pathways, so there wouldn't be there's obviously some crossing involved, but most of the path is on isolated pathway, so that it doesn't interfere with the traffic, and actually can potentially get faster throughput to areas of the community. In this case, we're just trying to get to the T stations within the community, but expanding it out to the grocery store was the next phase that we were thinking.
Yeah, well, if you do have any plans to that too as well, we'll have our contact information listed at the end, and I can briefly drop my email as well too, because we do, we are actively fielding conversations about shuttles. So if you are interested in, having a conversation or have some more documentation to that, concept that you were talking about, we'd definitely be interested in discussing it more, Dan.
Excellent.
So Logan, you're facilitating, but Stella, how much more time do we have?
Yeah.
Because I'll let you facilitate, because you know how much more you need to do, so yeah, I'm just
We're
doing a time
doing
check.
pretty well because we skipped over nominations at the beginning. So we should have about, I would say like 15-20 more minutes for this.
Okay, all right, so well,
So we have
30.
Yeah, we have about 3 or 4 questions total. So maybe if we jump to the next question, we maybe start doing that. We can also answer questions as we're going, because I see Franny and AC have their hands up.
You mean jump to our questions or to other questions left for Menti? I'm so confused.
Is it related to what we were just talking about? Do you want to continue that conversation?
Well,
Okay.
yeah, actually, I'm not sure. Is it related to the whole thing? I'll just ask. I participated in a tour of this has to do with arts districts, cultural districts. I recently participated in a tour of West Concord's cultural district, and Acton is looking into residents at Acton, and organizations into creating a cultural district. And it was said by the Mass Cultural Council staff to be in touch with MassDOT, because there's ways of coordinating on development that has to do with cultural district development and transportation, which plays into it. So my 2 questions are, would any of this kind of funding that helps people get to or from rail stations or create bus stops or whatever be relevant to that? And who do you suggest is the contact at MassDOT to talk about connections with cultural districts? Well,
that's a great question, Franny. And maybe I can answer the first part of it and then pass the second kind of MassDOT aspect off to Ethan. But I think in terms of, getting these transit transformation improvements in cultural districts or, other areas that are important to communities, like the way we're administering this program is we're having municipalities or RTAs or the MBTA apply for this funding, because we're going to have, that's our way of administrating funds. But, like, we are open to any kind of conversations that, if there's specific kinds of improvements, maybe working, with the RTA in your region to figure out, exactly what kind of improvements can kind of be, shuttled through a project, helpful, things like having a cultural district or other plans that, show the need for transit services will also kind of help back up those applications as well too. But I think, and Ethan, if you want to expand on this as well too, I think part of this is right now the way Ethan had kind of earlier mentioned is with transit modernization, a lot of the projects that we'd end up funding came kind of late in the process where we didn't have enough time to really examine them. And now that we're really establishing this transit transformation process and setting up a formal criteria, we're hoping to be able to start having more of those conversations. So, we can start, we're really working on setting up our conversations and, our relationships with RTAs and the MBTA with this program, but we'd eventually like to expand it so we can talk about municipal priorities and what's going on in local communities and kind of, making those connections. So it's more than just the priorities, the RTAs as well. But I guess for the contact information on that, I'll pass that off to Ethan to maybe talk about MassDOT if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of connections, different community assets, we are always working with MassDOT when it comes to trying to identify, not even just MassDOT, but also local planning staff as well, when it comes to trying to identify priority areas, not only for new projects, but to also identify how those project scopes may be adjusted to kind of establish new connections into and out of places like improving access to food, improving access to and from and safe access, things like, elementary schools. But if you reach out to me after this presentation, I'm more than happy to not only give my own contact info, but to also potentially put you in touch with some folks in a municipality or at MassDOT to kind of look further into this question and address some of the projects that could be made from it.
Thanks, Ethan. And before we jump to AC, I'll just explain this question real quick that came up on Menti. So what elements of Destination 2050's goals would you like to see prioritized? As we discussed earlier, like we are, building this criteria with Destination 2050 in mind. And with most of our investment programs, there has been a different scaling of priorities to kind of complement, what each program is really meant for. So with transit transformation, we're kind of thinking the same thing. You should be able to see a screenshot of our different goals. So if you have any answers on there, you can kind of look, or if you want to look there, you can. But yeah, I see some answers have already been rolling in, but I'll go to AC for your hand as well.
I didn't really have a question so much as a comment, but is there any way that you can try and make, I don't know if it's something you guys can do, but the state of good repair and resiliency should really be the same, or they should work in concert with each other. If you're going to spend money on making sure the system is repaired, there's no reason you shouldn't upgrade it to, sustainable and reliable systems. That's it. That was just my comment. I'm not sure how you address that or where you would in the planning phase, but the two should be working together, in my opinion.
No, I think that's a great point. And I'm not sure if Judy's here and if you want to mention your resiliency workshop that we just hosted last week, but that's something that we're definitely taking into consideration when we're drafting our criteria. And, I think having them separated is good for metric building, but also too, they are two big important topics. And of course, we're looking for that good state of repair, but maybe if Judy, I don't know if you do want to talk, but mentioning more about the resiliency criteria we've been drafting is, we're really starting to push and make, the stormwater improvements something that's standard as part of our, scoring. So, we're really getting great projects that are going to look forward for the future, I guess. But I don't know if Judy, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, Logan. And thank you for the comment. I think the strategy in the past with past LRTPs was to link resiliency and state of good repair, as well as modernization. And I think what we were seeing from that was we weren't getting a lot of really strong resiliency projects. It was kind of more of a fringe aspect of projects that were focused on other things. So it's definitely a really good thing to keep in mind. We're taking an approach of not quite separating the two, but giving resiliency a little bit of a bump in focus and in overall points towards prioritization so that we can hopefully see more meaningful resiliency improvements than we were seeing with kind of tacking it on as an added benefit, as the new perspective being more, we want resiliency to be embedded in every project and have our own kind of internal standards on how that works. And as Logan kind of alluded to, we held a workshop a week or two ago with agency stakeholders and regional advocacy groups, environmental practitioners to beef up what we mean by resiliency so that we aren't tacking it on as sort of a fringe. It's more, how are we going to actually get those really effective resiliency improvements, and happy to, talk more if anyone's interested in the results of that workshop. But I hope that kind of answers that question.
It wasn't really a question. It's just to me, they are linked. Like I said, if you are spending the money and you're doing a project, you should make sure that there's a resiliency overview, in every project you do. And the state of repair has to get done regardless. So I'm like, that should not be far from their mind. If you're going to repair it, you should be repairing it with resiliency in mind. That's it. It was just a comment. I don't know, like I said, I'm not sure how you would separate it. I see your point of why they stopped linking it, but I just want someone's voice there when they're considering the repair project, program, that resiliency is a voice as well. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely say, even having it be a separate goal area, it is getting more of a bump in prioritization and a fresh look at what we mean by resiliency. And with that, all projects that go through this program will be scored on a new set of resiliency criteria that's a lot beefier than in the past. So projects will have to demonstrate how far beyond minimum standards they're improving stormwater. We're giving preference to projects with nature-based design, and definitely still cleaning up that criteria, but I'm happy to share it with y'all if that's of interest. But it's definitely important, as you said, and even if like philosophically it might look separate, I think it's a stronger look in incorporating resiliency than we've done in the past.
I had a point on that.
Hold on, Dan. Sorry, Dan. I mean, so, Logan, how are you doing for time?
I think we're doing okay. We may want to move on to the next question in maybe a couple answers. I don't know, Stella, if I don't know about the rest of the agenda, if we have a quorum now, if that affects things, but
well, I was asking you how much more time you needed, because I think we're gonna want to be done with this section in about 10 minutes. So 10 minutes enough time?
So we have this question. I don't know if there's any final responses on this one. And then we have a more general just question slide. And then we have a survey question just about Menti to ask people, if you guys enjoyed it. But
all right, so
we can wrap this up pretty soon. So
okay, so it's your call as to whether you take Dan's question now. So it's either you do.
Yeah, Dan, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, we have the Mystic River walkway that comes down from I guess Somerville across the MBTA bus garage area, and we'd love to extend that down a piece. And it also benefits Medford, getting them a better transit pathway for bicycle and pedestrian way. From Draw 7 Park down is the area that we're talking about over into Ryan Field. Right now, it's a very dangerous crossover, and getting a bridge or cross there would be beneficial for all. But that's something that needs to be thought of later on. But getting pathing along a riverway sort of gets some of that element of trying to be resilient in transit / weather. And that was just my point.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ben. All right, so with that, I guess we'll just move on to the last question. It's more just general. Are there any questions about the transit transformation program that you guys have today? I know we've heard a bunch about the criteria and some potential projects as well too, but is there anything that we might be missing that you see glaring from this conversation as well? But we'll kind of just leave it here if there's any questions.
Well, I will just say Logan. I mean, that transformation for me is perhaps a dangerous word, because for me, transformation means that it's just unrecognizable, from what it is, currently. Modernization is making it better and improving it, but yeah. So when you say transformation, I'm really like thinking, hey, let's really go for transforming this thing. So even if shared vehicles isn't considered transit now, I would say in the transformation, maybe it will be, and that gets us to equity and all kinds of things that I think will be a benefit to residents as we try to go from point A to point B. That's it. Thanks.
Excellent. John McQueen.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Excellent thought-provoking topic. Question, I guess, overall, and a comment is, I guess I was very disappointed in the overall objectives listed by the LRTP. And because of that, I think this topic, the transit transformation, has suffered greatly. In what we see as ourselves transportation-wise by 2050, I think overall we're saying we want less cars and more transit reliance, more capacity and usage on transit, all forms, commuter rail, subway, buses, better and more effective. And we have obstacles to overcome, as the Mass Inc. poll just showed today. Safety, reliability, being able to get to or having access to various points of the transit system. We're not really aligned with $6.5 million to do that kind of huge transformation in terms of mode shares moving forward, and more mode capacities, being more reliant on transit. With $6.5 million, I just don't see it. I mean, you're trying to spread it. You're spreading it to the right things, but it just isn't going to happen. I know MBTA has its own silo budget, but it somehow has to be flagged and prioritized higher, I think, in the LRTP, if that's what our long-range transportation plan is. Our funding and our objectives should be aligned that way. That's just my opinion. Sorry.
No, thank you, John, and I appreciate the comment. I think we've heard a lot of similar comments to that as well too, and I think I don't think it's Ethan or my question to necessarily answer, and I'm sure we'd enjoy more transit funding too, but I think it's a question for the board, and the 6.5 million a year is what the target is. But with the 24-28 tip, we have funded it above that target because of the availability of the money and the funding. So I think there is definitely some appetite, but at the end of the day, I think it does remain to the board, and I do appreciate the comment on the long range transportation plan. But Len?
Well, I saw AC's hand up first, so it came down. I don't know if you want me to go before you, AC, or if you just accidentally put down your hand, but I'm willing to go after you.
Well, if you have a legitimate question, I had another comment regarding the transit altogether. What kind of comments or resistance are you seeing from the western half of the state? Because whenever you talk about transit and boosting transit, you're talking in the western half of the state. The population isn't the same, the remoteness of even your neighbors. I mean, I can't imagine that. I mean, is that coming into play why you think it's not being addressed so seriously? I mean, I don't know.
Maybe
a little bit beyond our scope, though, right?
Yeah, I know.
Boston, okay, that's why. But go ahead, go ahead, Logan.
I mean, I was gonna say, in terms of the Boston MPO region, like west for us is Metro West. So maybe Ethan, if you want to talk about the conversations we've had with Metro West, but like those conversations have been very fruitful so far, and they've been great on our kind of conversations together. And I think the slides we showed you guys earlier about, you know, RTA potential projects, that list was informed by 2 conversations we had with Metro West about, you know, the types of projects they kind of had on hand, and that they thought they could kind of shuttle through this program for funding. So while our like previous scope under transit modernization has been very MBTA focused, because, you know, at the time of funding, those were the kind of projects that were on our plate and available to fund. We have had a big focus, and the MPO board, you know, gave us this focus of supporting the RTAs as well too. So we've taken that very seriously, in including Metro West in the conversation. We've tried to include CADA as well, but you know, they're very understaffed, and it's hard to occasionally get a conversation with them. So we've been working with Metro West quite a bit. Ethan, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that as well, but
yeah, the only I would say Logan's right here, and as Len mentioned, Western Mass is outside of our scope as a region. We effectively kind of stop as a region at 495, and as a result, the communities we actually have in the western part of our region are very interested in this program. I think what is more relevant to the Boston region, though, still a valid question, is balancing the inner core communities and the transit needs of the communities that are in like your other subregions that may be less dense. Some communities may prefer that there's more investment in commuter rail. Others may look at, you know, the red line, the blue line, for example, and may seek improvements to improve those assets. Those are asset management decisions that are often made at the RTAs, but we are also trying to make sure our scoring criteria reflects those decisions as well.
And
So,
just
go ahead,
on
you
the
wanna say-
time, I moved to the last question.
Okay.
But just to answer, but Len, go ahead. I apologize.
Sure, and I was just gonna say, maybe kind of along the lines of me back on transformation. I said at I think when we did this exercise with the board, it can be a completely transformative experience to even if you don't change the system itself. And the example I gave was what the T was like before we had predictions as to when bus is going to arrive. That really, I think, transformed the way we approach the system, and the way we use it, and the way we feel when we use it. So it's one thing to be waiting for a bus when you have no idea how long it's going to take before it gets there. It's another thing when you know how long it's going to take. So if we can figure out things like that really transform the experience that people have with the system, even if it doesn't necessarily improve the system itself, that can go a long way. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Len. Yeah, and I see John's hand up as well.
Yeah, one thing to Len's point, I mean, yes, the having those boards in terms of arrival times of buses and things does help, but overall, if it's telling you versus the 10 minutes you want or need, that it's going to be a half an hour, the reliability and the frequency are the key issues according to the user ridership polls right now. So I mean, those are huge key things. Back to Logan's areas and such, I saw a lot, rightfully so, a lot of improvements around the Lynn area, those 2 stations, and also I guess on the Haverhill line. Does the Haverhill line feed into Lynn? Remind me. I think it does, either at least to Wilmington. Those are 2 problem spots. I mean, when is the Lynn commuter rail station actually going to be actionable is in operation? It's closed now, isn't it?
I believe it's currently closed. I'll pass it to Ethan. I think you know more about that area specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, if you're doing short-term things, maybe kind of align what you can really implement as a realizable improvement, perhaps. That's all.
Yeah, I believe the MBTA actually had a recent update last month on Lynn Station. The MPO has currently funded the project for $48.1 million, which tends to be a major status update. My understanding is that replacement of the station is currently at around 75% design, and once design is complete, it should be ready to move into construction.
And construction would be over the period of what, a year or 2 or 3?
I can't speak to the construction timeline, as I'm only aware of the current status of design.
Well, I know,
Maybe that.
but when you get to 100% design or whatever, just given your experience, a ballpark would be at least a couple of years, right?
I actually think there is some mobilization work ongoing, so it may be a couple of years. My understanding is that some of the old components of the station are currently being deconstructed right now.
Okay,
So things like the old elevator, escalator, etc. So they are already doing some work. The full design of the new structure as far as non-demolition, not sure on.
but
But
that's
again,
it's an
Okay.
inoperable asset right now for commuter rail and Lynn, right?
it is, but I think Sandy has more information on the
And-
actual status there.
And
so.
we're kind of out of time, so maybe Sandy can just drop it in the chat, and they can take care of the issue there. So, all right, now we're gonna move on. So thank you very much. And this was, I thought it was a good exercise, but you got the responses from the survey. So any closing remarks? All right.
We do have some just upcoming dates we can quickly share if you'd
Sure.
like.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is just the upcoming dates for transit transformation. So September 21st is going to be introducing the program back to the board. We will be introducing some draft scoring criteria as well. And then this program will be ideally approved and presented the final draft at October 19th at that MPO meeting. And just a reminder, if there's anybody in the room who's interested in applying for TIP projects, the application is going to be opening on November 1st for transit transformation, along with the rest of the investment programs. And then this was just our criteria update, but we've covered most of this information in our discussion. So I'll pass it back to you, Len.
Well, actually, so the criteria update was separate from this. So I was just trying to make sure that we had time to cover everything on the agenda. Am I correct about that, Stella? That was separate, right? I'm gonna go back to.
Yeah, we had another 10 minutes for that, so we should be
Alright.
good.
Yeah.
Ethan and Logan, if you want to briefly go over that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. So
Apologies for jumping the gun.
sure, no problem. Yeah, that's why I was kind of shutting things down so that we have 10 minutes for that. So, okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, appreciate it. Just as far as the scoring update side of the house for the TIP. So as mentioned earlier, in addition to the scoring criteria being rewritten for the transit transformation program with the new LRTP, MPO staff are currently rewriting criteria for those goal areas for all other investment programs, and it is underway. As Judy mentioned earlier, we had a resilience criteria workshop explicitly for that resilience goal area that was held on August 31st. And that workshop, just as this workshop is eliciting feedback for the transit transformation program, has helped us to kind of design new criteria to evaluate projects against as far as what is resilient. Moreover, there is an upcoming discussion around the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee, which is on the agenda for next week's MPO board meeting, September 21st, which will be responsible for reviewing project selection criteria and other duties, including early looks at kind of project scopes. This will be a committee that is established for members to the Boston MPO board, but will be coming in early 2024 and will help to kind of improve the transparency and the timeliness at which information around the TIP and its projects can be shared. If we just jump on to the next slide, if there's a next slide.
I think that's the last one.
I was going to say, I think that was everything there, but I wasn't certain. So that is the actual extent of my update, because it's fairly succinct. We unfortunately don't have any concrete materials to share in the form of scorecards, but those will be made available at the end of this process. I don't know if folks have any questions on upcoming events or timelines there.
I'm looking for hands. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So you presented us with a little quick look on criteria early on. So how is that fitting into this TIP scoring criteria update? Oh, that criteria was only for the transit transformation. Yeah, okay, fine. Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
It will actually be different between each investment program as well. While we are trying to make sure that they are mostly consistent for ease of application.
Yeah.
Things like, good example, our intersection improvements program
Right.
That has a weight of 25 out of 100 points just for safety, as it probably should, but.
Right. Gotcha. So, and we'll be able to comment on the criteria for the transit transformation at some later point.
Yeah, we'll be presenting all criteria, including transit transformation at a later point.
Okay. Yeah, so fine. All right. Well, so now we have about 5 minutes, so anyone has any questions on anything, to Logan, and Ethan, or if you just want to make a comment, on transit transformation and the scoring, please do.
I just want to say thank you.
Okay. All righty. Well, yeah, I'll say thank you too. So it was great. And I guess one quick little thing I'll add on the criteria for the transit transformation was on the sustainability part. I didn't really see anything about driving, economic in the economy or anything, or economic vitality, and I think that could be maybe wrapped into sustainability because if you help to improve the economic vitality of a given area through transit, the sustainability, as broadly defined, can be a benefit for people of all incomes, increase diversity and so forth. So that's it. Franny?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I get a little bit confused about how this overlaps with like big rail transformation, or the major rail commission. I forget what it's called. Looks for electrification and what are we doing, and how it relates to big transformative things that we need for our area, such as the North-South rail link. I always feel like it's an elephant in the room for myself, where it's like, well, duh, if you want to transform the area, you're going to need to connect our two systems. So it's always a little bit frustrating, not knowing how it fits in and whether there's smaller projects that can fit into this kind of program that could lead to applications for funding for those larger ones. This electrification was on there, which matches the rail transformation. Anyway, I just wanted to express confusion about that, not that you really have to have answers to it.
Yeah, I completely understand that. One very good example actually is our Complete Streets program at the MBTA, not the MBTA, at the MPO, because MassDOT also has a Complete Streets grant program, and that confusion comes up quite a bit. I slipped and mentioned the MBTA because, again, we are only one agency that is currently trying to address these issues. So we are working with the MBTA and RTAs to try to act as a force multiplier for their attempts to address this, and also MassDOT's Rail and Transit Division too. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the hard work they're putting in. So.
All righty. Well, thank you very much once again, and look forward to seeing you soon. Maybe even as early as tomorrow. No, we don't have a meeting tomorrow, right? Or do we? No, I think it's next week. It's next Thursday. Yeah. For me, every Thursday is like MPO Thursday. If I don't have a meeting on Thursday, then something feels a little wrong. So okay. Well, thank you. Well, I see AC hands. You have something else? One last.
Yeah, again, it was really in conjunction with what Franny just said, not really a question. And it might be just too broad, but regarding the North-South rail link, is there any way we can plan to just make sure that everything else that's getting planned, you preserve the right of way for something like that? If you're not going to get to it right away, at least preserve the right of way. Don't let it get developed, please. Is there any way we can ask for that or plan for that? So do all the stuff you want around it, but don't touch that where something big needs to happen. How does that get addressed? I don't know.
Well, we can work on that. We can We can certainly make that a goal, of the advisory council. I don't know if Ethan and Logan want to speak to that, but certainly whatever they say, we can then do what we want in order to try to make that policy,
I agree with that sentiment. it is a goal and it is something we definitely will consider. But it's nothing, of course, we're not an implementing agency, so I can't make any assertions as to what the scopes will be.
That's something if the group wants to do, then that's what we work on. We just hammer at it in a polite, respectful way, but just be persistent about it. So, all righty. So that's gonna be it. We're gonna move on. We're gonna back up to nominations since AC Rose is here. The floor. The sphere is yours. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we sent out a letter. We haven't had any responses as far as anyone that has been interested. So I personally would like to make a nomination to keep yourself and Franny in your positions for another year, and you're leading us in a good direction. I have heard from some people that they don't particularly like the Zoom. So I'm wondering if we are going to go back to a in-person setting at any time, but that's about it. That's really the only thing I heard. Other than that, no one stepped forward, so I would like to put forward for you two to stay in your chairs.
I guess we can see if anyone else wants to step up now, so.
Yeah, if there's anyone else.
Yeah.
I know, Lynn, you were pretty clear about a year ago. You said, I'm going to do one more year. I don't even know if you would accept a nomination for.
Yeah, no, I will. And so as I said, then it wasn't a matter of my feeling like I don't want to do it anymore. It was expressing a willingness, to step aside, and I'm still willing to do that. Next year or whatever. The goal is to have someone who really wants to do it. Next year, to work with me so that we can work on a good transition, and that could include, participating in meetings. Now, if you're not vice chair, there's a limit to which you can officially participate in meetings, but you can always attend meetings, and I can do as much knowledge transfer as I can, and that would involve just answering questions about the way things work. But no, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. In fact, I'm enthusiastic about it because of some of the things that are going on. We're working on the memorandum of understanding. And Stella and I have talked about some possibilities about that can broaden the reach of the advisory council and maybe create a pipeline for participants in the advisory council, but also on the MPO and just in the transportation, local transportation world, transportation world in general. So I'm excited in that respect. And in terms of the format of the meetings, well, the group can decide on what it wants. It can say that the MPO is leaning, well, not leaning. I think the policy now is that it will do 4 hybrid meetings a year. And I would say we'll want to preserve the remote access elements. So I would strongly say that we don't do exclusively in person, but we want to do hybrid. Then we can either follow the board's lead or not. We can, if the group wants to do hybrid every month, then I will need to talk with staff to see the extent to which that's possible. And if they then say it's possible, then we can do it. If they say that frequency isn't possible, then we deal with whatever frequency is feasible, until we try to make a different frequency feasible. And I'm not pandering.
I would be happy to support conversations about switching it up and having some in-person meetings, either staggered or consistently, or just other in-person activities. I'm happy to support that.
So Franny, is your hand back up?
Yeah. And if we had in person, I think, but making them not in the middle of winter. Also, if I'm continue as the vice chair, I want to take seriously the role of the vice chair in looking at membership issues. Because I see our memberships are waning, and I also have a specific memory of like 10 years ago, sitting in the room in MassDOT building, and sort of for some reason there was a reason that people started saying we need to have a rule about who's on and who's not. And so if you came to 3 meetings, if you missed 3 meetings, I think in a row, you were not in it anymore or something. And I'm just thinking maybe we need to revisit that, because this is like 10 years later, at least, since we were talking about that. And maybe we should lighten the requirement for being considered whatever a member of RTAC is. So anyway, I don't have an opinion about it either way. I just think maybe we should discuss it.
A voting member or just a member?
Just in order to be a voting member, you had to, I don't remember why we created this. And we started, it used to be that everybody would sit around the table and some people would be members, and then we started moving people that weren't voting members to the outside of the table and things like that. So I'm sort of happy we're not in that power thing of being at a table or outside a table when we're on Zoom. But I just think we need to just think about it or revisit it or decide not to make any changes. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I would say that is in the vice chair's purview, and so I think the chair is amenable to putting whatever the vice chair wants on the agenda anytime. I'm happy for you to drive that, and certainly happy to work with Stella on other avenues for increasing the outreach of the MPO, and that isn't specific to, I think for the vice chair, it's specific to the advisory council. I mean, it's the role of the vice chair to try to increase membership on the advisory council, but that doesn't limit your influence when it comes to MPO outreach in general and trying to develop a pipeline for the MPO as well as the advisory council. That is a goal, but that'll come out in the letter that we have to submit to our colleagues as we ask for their vote, even if it's not competitive next month. All righty, so we're on schedule, and we'll do the approval of past meeting minutes, because we still have a quorum, right? Okay.
Actually, could I say something about that before we start that? Because I was down in the last few minutes when I spoke, it said that the League of Women Voters spoke. And I haven't formally added RTAC to my coalitions that I'm on for League of Women Voters. So I feel really uncomfortable about sort of saying it's League of Women Voters speaking until I go through that process with them. So even though if I had that hat on, I think I want in those last 3 minutes or maybe 2 minutes, two sets of minutes or 3 sets of minutes, where every time it said my name, it said League of Women Voters, parentheses, Franny Osmond said. And so I would love to change it to Franny Osmond for now, because I'm not formally representing them yet.
Franny, I think we had changed your affiliation a few months ago at your request,
yes,
but we can certainly change it back for now.
Well,
we need to have some affiliation. So.
Oh, we do? I can't just be a resident.
Let me look into it and we can reconnect after the meeting.
Okay. Yeah. But I'm in so many boards and committees, I could probably, but they just have this very formal process by which I fill out a request form, and I just don't want to misrepresent myself.
Well, you do have to be affiliated with a group, so
I mean, I'm on the League of Women Voters Legislative Action Committee,
right.
But in order to formally be a league representative here, I would like to go through the formal process there. So.
Right. Well, it's just that you have to be a member of the group, and I think by virtue being on the council, representing that group is also a member of the council, so this is getting a little complex.
Well, I would love it in those minutes, at least those
Yeah.
first 3 minutes, until I come back to you and say, okay, now I've added you as a formal coalition. If you could just
Right.
change it to my name, and then we'll deal with
Yeah.
who I'm affiliated with in the background. But just in the notes, I would like
Yeah.
to change it
Yeah.
to Franny Osmond.
Might be more fodder for the MOU, if not the operating plan, all right, well, look, we'll work this out, and we'll work out something that works for everybody, and that can be applied globally, so that, yeah, I won't say anymore, not because I'm concerned, more that it just take a lot of words in order to spell it out clearly, and it's just not necessary at this point. So, okay, so I guess we just amend the minutes accordingly, and we may end up amending the minutes again later on, depending on what comes out of our future discussions. So with that, and do we feel that we can do a global approval of these minutes? Because my understanding is that you don't have to be present at a given meeting to approve minutes. You just have to say that you're confident. Your vote positive is saying that you're confident, meaning that the minutes do reflect what happened, at those meetings, based on the presence of other people who were at those meetings and who were voting affirmatively. But it's up to the group as to whether we do one global vote or we take them all at a time. Franny?
I was just going to move. But when you started that, I was just going to. Oh no, my hand was up from before, but I would like to make a motion to approve that whole set of minutes.
Yeah. All right. So I will need a second on that, and then I'll entertain a discussion as to whether that's the way folks want to move forward. I don't want people to feel that we can't do them one at a time. We have the time, and so that's a second coming from John McQueen. So now just discussion about how we're going to move forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. Stella, since this is like a global vote, I just kind of want to maybe do this a little more formally, in terms of the votes. If you could do a roll, that'd be great. If you're not really set to do that, you are. I'm seeing you nodding your head. Yes. Okay, please.
Yeah. All right. Len Diggins.
Yes.
Franny Osmond.
Yes.
Anna Cristina Fregoso.
Yes.
John McQueen.
Yes.
Andy Reeker.
Yes.
Owen McDonald.
Yes.
Skylar Larrabee.
Yes.
And Scott Zadikis.
Aye.
All right. So that carries unanimously.
Great. So what I have next, Stella, because I just switched screens, is the chair's report.
Yep.
Okay. Oh yeah. Never mind. I see it. I see it on the main screen here. Yeah. Okay. Well, before we do that, maybe do a quick old business, new business. Anyone has any old business, new business? Okay. And all right. Well, so in terms of the chair's report, a number of things are going on. I'll say that whenever you have a chance to go and look at the materials from any of the meetings, I strongly encourage you to do so, because the PDFs of some of the research coming out of the group, or the work plans, are just really, it's just a lot of information in it. And even if you can just like read one of them a month, I think you really learn a lot, and sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, but that usually indicates that you're learning stuff. And if you have questions, staff is always open to questions. You can just send the questions to Stella and she can find the appropriate person. You can also ask me, because I enjoy answering questions. And if I don't know the answer, that's even more stimulating to me, because either I'll go and figure it out, or I'll ask Stella to find who we can ask. So that's my little pitch for the materials. So since we didn't have a meeting, there have been a number of meetings, and first I'll say that we do have a new operations plan, and that's an interesting read in and of itself, although perhaps not as exciting, but it might be something that we can use to determine how we might want to change the bylaws, and maybe it's a good thing that Dave Montgomery isn't here, because I don't know how well that'll go down with him, but hey, we'll see how he feels when we cross that bridge, and the other thing, this was out of the August 3rd meeting, no, actually it's the July 20th meeting, and also the July 20th meeting, we did approve the long range transportation plan. Our letter was submitted. It was acknowledged. And I did vote for it. And we will work on our concerns about it. And that will certainly be a topic in a meeting before the end of the year for sure. From that the next meeting, the August 3rd meeting, there was a work scoping on the flexible fixed route bus service, and that was a UPWP study that we pushed for quite hard last time, and so it's good to see that getting underway. And Liz Williams, from MassDOT, presented on the mass vehicle census, which is an interesting dashboard that's been developed. I'm not quite sure how we would use it, but it's just nice to know that resource is there. Then on the 17th of August, there was a meeting with the Congestion Management Committee, and the focus on that is on roadway pricing. Yes, roadway pricing. I'm freezing a little bit because I'm trying to be careful about the words that I use, because I don't want to oversell it. But there is a study that's underway, and once again, this is a UPWP study. Where we are looking into the way various cities or have implemented some degree of roadway pricing. So the first phase of that was to talk to these other municipalities. So we've done that, and they've given us an assessment of those interviews, and how folks feel that their plans are working. One is to be implemented, and that's the one in New York, and I'll strongly urge you to go and read that. And now the next phase is for us to determine how it is as an MPO we want to approach that issue. And so maybe I'll get this on the agenda soon so that we can give some input on that before it goes before the full board. I don't know when it's going before the full board. So if it's going in the next 2 weeks, it may not be enough time. But if it's more than that, I'll see if I can work it into an upcoming agenda. But I thought the presentation on that was really good, with a lot of good information. And also at the August 17th meeting was the result of a couple of intersection improvement programs, one in Wellesley and one in Stowe. Once again, I think there were some really interesting results out of these, and it'll be interesting to see if the municipalities do implement some things. They certainly did express an interest in doing so, and now I think actually one of the members of the select board from Wellesley was there to acknowledge that they were happy the study was done, and look forward to trying to implement some things. And these intersection improvements were mainly for the benefit of pedestrians. I think more so than for the throughput of motorized vehicles. And there was certainly emphasis on cycling and connecting. In one case, I think maybe it was Stowe, connecting to commuter rail, improving the ability to connect to commuter rail. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are working on the the MOU, let me rephrase that and say we're doing some preliminary work on the on the MOU. I mean, I know it's kind of thing that can sometimes drive people crazy when you have like a committee, you know, to set the framework, for another committee, but that's where we are, you know, but it's good. It's a good thing to do. I mean, the feds asked us, or suggested to us, I think rather strongly, that we need to update our MOU, especially since the previous MOU said that we would update it, I think, on an annual basis, and we don't do that, you know. And so, but it's time for an update. I think it's been more than 10 years. And so we are working on the framework, that we'll present to the board, and then the board can decide, whether it wants us to follow that framework. And then I don't know how long the process will be that we actually do, and how long it will take for us to actually revise the MOU. So having not done the chair reports for a while, that's it. You know, if you have any questions, let me know. But this, once again, it's just a fraction of what we have been covering in the meetings. So. Alrighty, well, maybe my mistake was that maybe I should have stopped after each one and asked folks if they have any questions. I don't know. All right, well, I might be in a position to give you 5 minutes back. But you'll have to make the motion for that. If you want the 5 minutes back, you gotta get them yourself. I can't do it as a chair, you know. Okay.
I second John's motion.
Okay.
John put a motion in the chat.
Oh, okay. So all right, and for any seconding it, so then without objections, we're adjourned. Everybody, thank you very much for. I thought it was a good meeting, and we'll hopefully just try to make the next ones better. Take care.
Hey, Lynn,
Yeah.
if anybody had a nomination after this meeting, have the nominations closed or not?
They're closed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.